the money's not going to solve all of your problems.
Money, 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 money. Money, 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 money. Money, 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 money.
I remember I had a client a couple of years back who built up, his business was building like video games, and then he sold to some European business. I think it was like $5 million, and then had to earn out over a couple of years and was getting like, $500 to $1 million every year, like a lot of money. You're thinking about, buying a car or making a house move or whatever it may be. Sometimes the emotion gets in the way a little bit, and you just like react, and you react in the moment. What are we looking at there, Billy, and how do we approach it?
Yeah, so obviously what we've just spoken about, that comes first, right? Like the bigger term goals and plans, and how we're going to make this a positive thing that affects our life in a positive way. Once that's all done,
Welcome back to the Winners Playbook. Josh here with my regular co-host Billy. Now, maybe you've sold a car, got a bonus, or received an inheritance. Today, we're going to be unpacking how to set priorities, build a buffer, and put a lump sum of money that you may have received to work without second guessing every move. And before we get into our topic, as usual, Billy, any news or anything new on your end, mate?
nothing too exciting, mate. Like we spoke about last week, I've just moved house, so there's a lot going on there. And we've got our staff social event with a bit of lawn bowls this afternoon, which would be nice.
Yeah, we
And then into the long weekend with the grand final holiday tomorrow. So
Yeah, I didn't actually know. I was at training this morning at jiu-jitsu, and they were talking about the grand final. I was like, boys, I don't even know who's playing in the grand final. So I don't know what that says about me, but it's Geelong and Brisbane, is it? It's Geelong and Brisbane.
correct.
All right. Is there a favourite in amongst that? They were talking about Geelong, saying that they normally show up to finals, but
They do. Brisbane won it last year, so they've got one under their belt. So it could be a good game.
yeah, okay. Where's your money, Billy? Where are you sitting?
Oh, look, I'm same as you, working kids, and then you just lose your interest in sports and all that stuff. So I need to get one of my boys into footy so I can watch more games.
Sure.
But if I had to put money down, I guess Brisbane. Yeah, my wife's from Brisbane, so we'll go with the Lions.
Yeah, you take the momentum. Now, looking forward to long weekend. Do a few things around the house. Doing a bit of painting early morning yesterday, which was fun. Not really. But getting some stuff done around the house, and quarterly event today, as you mentioned. I think this is our third year we've been doing some bowls, so I think we're actually going to get a trophy going this time around and make it a bit more competitive with the winners that come out on top. So looking forward to it, and hopefully the weather actually holds off as well, because it's looking a bit grey down here in Melbourne. But anyways, we'll leave that for now, and we're going to talk about the topic. So we're talking about if you get a lump sum of money, which could come in a lot of different shapes and forms and sizes, of course, what do you do with it? Because it can be a real, integral point in your life where it could actually change the trajectory of your life, depending on how much money it could be. I've seen some very large inheritances come in from time to time, or it could even just be a bonus. You get a windfall of money somehow. Maybe you hit the lottery. I've seen that happen before as well. Not often, but I've seen it once. Or you sell a car or sell something. What do you actually do with it, and how do you sort of set your priorities from there? So what would you say to clients, Billy? A client comes in, they've run into some money in some way, shape, or form. Where do you start? How do you start by setting the priorities before we start making any moves?
It's interesting because there's loads of stories about people winning the lotto and it ruins their life.
Yeah.
Right? Because all their friends and family know they've got all this money, and then they'll start coming at them, and then they make some silly short-term decisions with that money, and then often they end up broke again, or they end up burning a bunch of relationships. So, that's winning the lottery, but even inheritance, like the same sort of thing can happen. So ideally, you don't do anything, right? Initially, you might go out for a nice dinner or something, but you don't do anything until you've planned this out. Like, what do you want? What do you want from this money? Because it can be life changing in a positive way if you plan it out and then execute on that plan. It doesn't mean you can't go and buy a new car or go on holiday or something, but you need to sit down, really think about what this money can do for you, and what are the priorities, right? And if you've got a partner, obviously that's with your partner.
Yeah, I agree. And because if you've got bad habits and you run into some money, the money's not going to solve all of your problems. And if you don't have much money beforehand, or you're hemorrhaging all your cash and you're not investing, like, you could be quite easily tempted to, put that all to things that aren't necessarily going to push you ahead in life. And I remember I had a client a couple of years back who built up. His business was building like video games, and then he sold to some European business. I think it was like 5 million bucks, and then had an earn out over a couple of years, and was getting like 500 to $1 million every, like, a lot of money. And I was like, "Oh, so what have you done?" And he said, "Nothing." And he said, "My mum always told me if I ever, built up some money, sit on it for a year." And I was like, it's probably not bad advice, actually. Like, don't go out there and do anything. Just sit on it, and then make some decisions. And I think that goes in a lot of other aspects of your life as well. Like, if you're thinking about, buying a car or making a house move or whatever it may be, sometimes the emotion gets in the way a little bit, and you just like react, and you react in the moment. Where, like, when I think about a lot of those things, as best as I can, I try to go, okay, if I'm in a moment, I want to do it now, I want that, or whatever it may be. Let's sit on it for like 3 or 6 months, and let's just see in 3 or 6 months, do I still want to do the same thing or get whatever it may be? I think that's a good way to ultimately approach it. And then just, be deliberate with it, not just, just splash it out. Hey, I'm going to do this, help friends, family, holidays, whatever it may be. Like, actually sit down, think. And this is where you might actually get an advisor, if you do need one, to help set what those priorities ultimately look like, and then how to best structure that. And we'll talk about some of those different ways in a moment of where that money can start flowing on over into. But if we talk specifically about, most people would go, okay, I want to start investing some part of that money. I want to put some money into the share market. And let's just say someone has run into $500,000 or $1 million, whatever it may be. They want to deploy into the share market. What are we looking at there, Billy? And how would we maybe consider that? Would we dump it all in one go? How do we approach it?
Yeah, so obviously what we've just spoken about, that comes first, right? Like the bigger term goals and plans, and how we're going to make this a positive thing that affects our life in a positive way. Once that's all done, then it's okay, of this lump sum, X amount is earmarked for long-term investing or long-term wealth creation, and the chunk of it's going to go into the stock market, right? So do we put it all in one go or feed it in over a long period of time? There's different schools of thoughts on this. I know a lot of advisors say always put it in one go, because history shows that on average that gets you a better outcome, right? Because the market is rising more often than it's falling. So mathematically speaking, put it all in one go, you'll get the best outcome. But we know in reality, if the stock market's had this ripper run like it has recently, and it's at record highs, if you throw it all in now, there is a good chance that in the first, year or two of your investing experience, you're going to have like a rough patch, or market's going to fall at some point. And if you're relatively new to investing, that can be quite stressful. And we know that some people will just bail, right? Like put $1 million in the stock market in one go because their advisor told them to. A year later, it's worth 900 grand. And they go, why am I doing this for? And they'll panic and click the sell button. So to mitigate that risk, it's often better to just feed that money slowly into your investments over a period of a year or two. So you get comfortable with it. If the stock market does have a sharp fall soon after you start investing, you don't have everything on the line. So I do like dollar cost averaging in that situation. Yeah. How do you view that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree, Billy. And I even did it with clients. I think it was around March, April, when, tariffs were really heating up, and Trump was, that was all kicking off in the air. And we've seen that dip. If you look back at any of the share markets, you would have seen that dip into March and April there. And then, so a lot of clients, actually not so many, but naturally everyone was getting a bit worried about their investments and what was going to occur. So I said to clients, like, two options: do nothing, or we either start investing basically at this point in time, because we've invested you correctly based upon your age, your risk appetite, and so on. But I had clients that started the dollar cost average at that point in time, who were sitting on more money. But I'm like, hey, let's just like start chipping away at it. Don't know how low this is going to go, for how long. We know it will come back over time. Who knows when, because no one genuinely knows. But start chipping away at it. So I'm naturally a fan of that dollar cost averaging strategy. But you're right, it depends on where the market's at. Like, if you're in crash territory where the market's already down 20%, like, I would be a bit more
You'd be
on
more
board with
some bit more lump summy.
Yeah, I'd be lump summy. I'd be more lump summy at that point. I'd be lumpy. I would be going in a bit harder at that stage. But that's what I do with a lot of my clients is, hey, let's start the dollar cost averaging. We might do a little lump sum at the beginning, start dollar cost averaging, and let's just see where things go here. Keep our powder dry, so to speak. And when those times come, because we know they'll come at every now and then, when we see the market starting to pull back, then we can speed it up and start pushing and deploying that money in a much quicker fashion at that point in time, and take advantage of those discounted prices for however long they may last. I'm definitely a fan of that, but that's generally only relative to when you are investing into the share market. Because if we then explore other investments like buying property, where you can't dollar cost average into a property, you got to lump that money down, and so you don't really have that privilege when you look at some other asset classes. But what about debt, Billy? Where does debt fit into the equation? Like, most people are going to generally have a mortgage of some sorts, or some other debts maybe. If you've got $500 to $1 million come in, you've got $750,000 mortgage and maybe a car loan, would you say, hey, let's take that and just wipe it out, or what would your approach be, you reckon?
If you've come across a large lump sum, usually you're going to want to seriously consider clearing any debt that isn't tax deductible or tax effective debt.
Yep.
As like a general rule. I mean, obviously it depends on a few moving parts, but like, first thing you're going to do is, if you've got personal loans, credit cards, car loans with high interest rates, like, they're generally going to be the first to go. And then depending on the scope of the amount of money you've got, you might be looking at the home mortgage as well and clearing that. There are some other factors, like we've spoken about before. If you live in a house and you're potentially going to convert it to an investment property in the future, like, that's going to be a strategy you're looking at, then you may not want to clear all the debt on that. So there are a few moving parts. But certainly if you come across a large amount of money, any sort of bad debts or high interest rate debts, you're generally going to want to get rid of.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if you have a mortgage, you might be able to stick that money in the offset for a period of time, and maybe not, like you were talking about, if that property is going to become an investment property in future, because you might look at then buying another home, maybe with your windfall of money, however that came in. I think that's really important to highlight. And just noting like little things you got to be conscious of, because if you keep it in the offset, you can always shift it around and it doesn't impact the taxable or the tax deductibility of your home loan. Whereas if you put it straight into the redraw and then you start moving it in and out and the property becomes an investment property, it actually starts to get very messy at that point in time. And you may mess up how efficient your loan tax deductibleness would then be at that stage. Because if you basically put it in your redraw, so you pay it into your loan, and then you want to pull that money out to then go and buy a new principal place of residence, that's actually not going to be tax deductible, because you're pulling money out of the redraw and you're using it to go and buy something that's not producing any income whatsoever. So in that situation, you're going to have all of the debt sitting there, but it's not tax deductible. Whereas if you put it in an offset account and then you convert your principal residence to an investment property and you just take money out of your offset and go and buy a new home, in that situation, all of that loan on that former home will be tax deductible. So there's these little nuances that you've got to be very careful of, because a lot of people may not even have an offset and they'll be like, yeah, I'll just throw it into my redraw. I see that happens so often, but you do have to be very, very careful around this, because you can actually hurt yourself. But I'm on the same page there, Billy. Agree with all of that.
I think the summary is like, this is an opportunity to optimize your debt mix. Yeah, like any debt you've got, you want it to be tax deductible, and any debt that's not tax deductible, that's like on the chopping board.
Yeah, and depending on the windfall of money that you get, you might actually clear off your bad debt and then actually look at borrowing more good debt at that point in time. And I've had clients that have done exactly that before. So same page there, Billy. And what about if we talk about how much do we keep aside though? So if we're going to deploy and put to debt or invest, but if we talk about an emergency fund, like are we going to say, look, deploy all of that cash, or how much should we keep on the side? Is there a right formula to it? Like, what's your general approach to that one?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely depends on your situation. If you're 25 years old living in a share house, you don't need a whole lot of emergency cash. But if you have a large family home, kids going to school, 2 cars, there's a lot of expenses that can just come up out of nowhere. Like you need plenty of emergency cash. So it absolutely depends on your situation. It also depends, like say you've come across this big lump sum. Moving forward, are you going to have much monthly surplus? Like how much are you earning versus how much are you spending? If things are tight, if cash flow is tight, you want a bigger emergency fund. But if you're earning way more than you're spending, you can quickly top up that emergency fund easily. So there's actually quite a few variables. But in general, for me, like if you've got a family, like 20 or 30K is the absolute minimum these days, I think. Because one thing goes wrong with the house, one big medical bill, like that can be 10K right, pretty quickly.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like, yeah, I caught up with some clients earlier in the week, and they've got a loan on their home of about 1.8, 1.9 million. You look at the mortgage.
They want a big emergency fund. Yeah.
Yeah, like you look at those mortgage repayments, you're looking at plus
Yeah.
10 grand at least just in mortgage repayments. Then you throw in your cost of living, 2 kids, schooling, etc. So yeah, like you say, Billy, it's definitely relative to your own situation. And yeah, there's other factors of like, do you have a surplus? As you said, like I've had some clients who had money, but then actually weren't earning a great deal of income. Like it was a couple, one person was working, and it was like a household income of about 90 grand. So like between a couple, that's actually not much for a couple if you look in general terms across the average of Australia. So I was like, all right, we had to be pretty careful around how we were then going to deploy that money and how much passive income we're going to be getting on that relative to their lifestyle. And there's a lot of other factors that need to be balanced out. So I think, the key message there is, of course, like it depends. Generally does make sense to have some form of, liquid cash there, or some sort of assets that are liquid as well. Because if you put it all into property, you can't just take a little bit out of that property. Whereas if you have it at least in some shares, which are a little bit liquid, not that you want to touch them, you can always sell down on those and generally get your money out within 48 hours or something of sorts. So there's a bit of a balancing out between that cash, shares, property, whatever else it may be, which is always worth considering.
And I think it's worth chipping in there too. Like sometimes if you come across a lump sum, sometimes the answer isn't to go rush out and look for investments. Like if you land 50 grand, but you've got $1 million mortgage and cash flow's tight.
Yeah.
You shouldn't necessarily be doing much with that 50 grand other than whacking it in your offset account for emergency cash.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't disagree there, Billy.
Because that's a common question, right? Oh, I've just come across, I got a bonus of 30 grand, or I sold this, I've got 30 grand. Sometimes it's, well, you're not in a position to invest because we need to get on top of cash flow, make sure there's actually a saving or a surplus each month, or it might not necessarily be the right time to go blazing away in the stock market.
I think that's such a good point to raise, because like naturally people would just think that, like it's probably naturally first it would be invest. That would be what we would do. We would generally be thinking, but no, it might be like, hey dude, you've got a huge mortgage here and you got 2 kids going through a school. How about we just do the not so sexy thing and just whack that in the offset? Not as exciting, but it might sometimes be the thing that should happen, of course, which is where, okay, it's like, why do I need an advisor to tell me that? Well, they could have stopped you from possibly making a mistake that you could have done with that money. So, there are
50 grand worth of Bitcoin or Ethereum.
Oh, you
Might be for the best.
You could have the pundit say, Billy, that if you look at how Bitcoin's gone in the last 5 years, it might be like, that's good. That's a good investment. But
Maybe.
that's up there on the risk spectrum, is it? That's really up there. But then what about if we're talking about like structuring? Because I think this is something that a lot of people will get wrong, is they would just naturally go, okay, money comes in. Yeah, we're going to start doing some investing. I'm going to open up an investment account in my own name or wife's name or husband's name, whatever it may be, and off I go. But if it's a lot of money, that's where we might consider other structures to start looking at investing. And do you want to touch briefly on some of those, Billy, what we might consider?
Yeah, so we mentioned it before around debt and tax. If you've landed a decent sized lump sum, tax is a big consideration, because if you go and earn a salary, there isn't much you can do about income tax. Like you could do some extra super contributions, some negative gearing. There isn't much else you can do. But if you have a sum of capital to invest, you do have more options. Like whose name are you going to invest in? Who's going to own those investments? Because you've got your own name. You've got your own name, joint names, your partner's name, a family trust, a company, a super fund. So there's actually a lot more choice and control over tax when you've got a large amount of capital or cash sitting there. And you want to plan that out from the start, because once you bought a property, you can't really change the ownership, right, without paying stamp duty again and all those other costs. So you need to plan that out before you go and buy stuff and invest money.
Yeah, and I think we've all probably seen that as advisors, where clients have just got that wrong. Like I've spoken about some sort of dramatic cases in the past of, seeing clients own 10 properties in their own individual names, and they're both business owners as well. It's like, and they're like, oh, we're so worried about the risk of if something happened to the business, but it's like, well, we can't do anything. Like you've actually got all the properties in your own individual name. you're going to incur stamp duty and capital gains if we start selling all of those. So it just talks to the importance of getting this right from the get-go, and talking about some clients I've worked with as well. If it's a large amount of money, we might actually consider getting like that in a trust, protecting that for the family, but then just having flexibility into the future around how we manage and distribute those gains or income, which go out in the form of distributions from that trust year to year. A family trust can actually make a hell of a lot of sense in a lot of different situations if the circumstances are right, or it could be a matter of, well, it's not enough money to warrant maybe putting it into a family trust. So, joint name, your name, partner's name might actually be the best solution, or it could even be superannuation. Can't forget our old friend superannuation, because that's the most tax effective structure in Australia.
Yeah.
So, if you're 60 and you're retired, superannuation, let's go. You're going to be investing tax free at that point in time, up to $2 million per person in there. So that could possibly be your best friend, and you've got full access to the money as well. But if you reverse it and you're in your 20s or 30s and you get a big windfall of money, I don't know about dropping all of that in super at that point in time.
I don't worry too much about super. Yeah.
Yeah, for 30 or 40 years, knowing, the government could change it at any point in time, which I suppose exists with any structures. But I'll be a little bit careful around that one. And then what about in closing then, Billy? So talking about like a simple split, it's a difficult one because, there's no set way of how you should ever distribute money as a general rule of thumb across any of our clients. But if you talk about a split across like cash, debt, investments that most people could use, of course, not being advice, like would you be able to put a general rule of thumb there together, you reckon?
I think it's mostly about timeframes and goals and where you're at in your life, right? Like obviously, okay, emergency fund, how much do we need there? That's number one, which we've spoken about.
Yep.
That's your short term. And then are there any other short-term expenses? Like if you land a large inheritance, for example, and you haven't taken the family on a holiday for 3 years, then I'm 100% supportive of let's go on a big holiday because this is our opportunity and, we need a break. So emergency cash, expenses in the next 12 to 24 months, right? Might be an improvement on the home or a holiday or whatever. That's going to be in cash, right? Then it's, okay, what is our long-term wealth creation strategy? So it's probably going to be stock market or investment property. And that's the rest of those funds, right? So you're just splitting across different timeframes and buckets and purposes, and then going from there. So no, there's definitely no prescribed formula because it's completely different for every household.
Yeah, I can't think of any way you could possibly make an exact formula like the 50-30-20 budgeting rule, which is still not a flawless system for managing your money. Because like if it's 50 grand versus 10 million, if you applied a 30-30-30-10 or something like that to it, that's clearly not going to be relevant for 50,000 versus $10 million. Like those are going to be very, very different. And you could have more debt, more expensive lifestyle, be closer to retirement and shorter term goals of that money. Maybe you want to deploy some of that money, to the kids in the next couple of years, help them buy their first homes, and therefore throwing that into other properties or into the share market, which are long-term investments, may not necessarily be a good idea. So I guess the simple answer is it really just depends. Sit down, maybe you're going to speak with a financial advisor who's going to help you figure out all of that, and take a moment to actually just soak it all in before you ultimately get out there and make a move, because it can be expensive and you may regret it. Of course, ultimately, if you get it wrong, which unfortunately I think we've all seen as advisors over the past. So we might.
And let's just slide in there because it just happens so much. Don't just blaze away and buy an investment property or like click on the first Facebook ad of someone trying to sell you a property. Like that component definitely needs some consideration and the right advice, because I just wanted to put that in because I've seen that happen so much recently.
Yeah. What's funny with that, Billy? I reckon genuinely what would occur is, your phones listen to you. Like we've all had it. Your phones are actually listening to you. And, we start talking about whatever it may be, buying an investment property, or you will start probably getting targeted ads pushing you towards these things that you're thinking about, or holidays or whatever it may be. And you're going to be probably more inclined to go, well, okay, that property I can get in 5% deposit, guaranteed returns of 20% every year. Okay, sign me up, let's go. And so, I think you'll be really careful around that, because not to be a conspiracy theorist, but I think we've all seen phones do it, and you could quite easily fall into the trap, and off you go. You're buying a property here off the plan, apartment somewhere in Queensland or Melbourne. That's probably never going to grow. Unfortunately, I think we've all seen that, haven't we, Billy?
Yes, we see it a lot. So if you do come across a large amount of money, don't just click on those ads that pop up. Like try and get a good referral or listen to a really good podcast maybe, and then figure out who's like best placed to help you.
Yeah, get educated. Maybe just chat to a few people. Maybe even get a few opinions from different advisors as well. I've seen clients do that ultimately before as well.
We've all been shopped around and we don't always love it, but 100% it's not the worst thing to do.
All right, guys, we'll bring it to a close. So, of course, if you've got a lump sum, I think the key notes are here is to really take your time, sit on it, get some good advice, get around the right people before you ultimately make any moves with your money. But until next time, Billy, we're going to enjoy the long weekend. I'll see you out on the bowls, or do we call it the bowling court? I don't know. What do you
I
call
think
it?
it's the green, isn't it?
It's in the green. Oh, it's the green.
Pitch, the field, whatever it
I'll
is.
see you out of the green. Hopefully the weather holds up, and we'll be back on the Winners Playbook as usual next week. So until then, I'll see you then, Billy.
All right, see you, Josh.
Disclaimer. The information contained in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into account your personal circumstances. Please head to the show notes if you wish to book in a free 15-minute call to discuss your personal situation.